They say betrayal hits like a bullet. Quick, sharp, final. But mine didn't. Mine came slowly, like poison dripping through my veins, burning me from the inside until I couldn't breathe. That night started beautifully. It was supposed to be a celebration, our 5th wedding anniversary. David had promised me a night to remember. He wasn't wrong. I'll never forget it. I remember standing in front of the mirror, fixing my lipstick. My hands trembled slightly, not from nerves but excitement. I wanted everything to be perfect. The deep red dress, the pearl earrings he'd given me last year, the perfume he once said smelled like home. I smiled at my reflection, whispering to myself, "You're lucky, Sam. You really are." Back then, I still believed in our fairy tale. David was charming, the kind of man who could make anyone feel like they were the only person in the room. He had a laugh that filled the air, a confidence that made people listen. When we first met, he made me feel seen, loved, safe. I thought he was my forever. So when he asked me to meet him at a luxury restaurant downtown, the same one where he proposed, I thought he was being romantic. I thought he was reminding me that after all these years, he still cared. I wish I had known what that night was really about. The restaurant was glowing when I arrived, soft golden light spilling through the windows, jazz playing in the background, couples laughing over wine. I felt like I was walking into a dream. But David wasn't at our table yet. The hostess led me to a corner booth overlooking the city. I sat down, looking around for him. My heart raced with anticipation. I had even brought him a small gift, a leather watch I'd saved up for. He loved watches. I checked my phone. 7:25 p.m. He was late, which wasn't like him. David prided himself on punctuality. So I waited 10 minutes, then 20. The waiter came by twice and I forced a smile, saying he'd be there any minute. But when the clock struck 8, something inside me started to sink. I texted him, "Are you on your way?" No reply. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. And then, just as I was about to give up, I saw him walking through the entrance. My heart leaped, but then stopped. He wasn't alone. Walking beside him was my best friend, Claire. Claire, the woman who had been like a sister to me. The woman I had trusted with my secrets, my fears, my dreams. She looked stunning, wearing a silky black dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her hand brushed his arm casually as they entered, laughing at something he whispered. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe she was meeting someone else here. Maybe she didn't see me. Maybe. But then he looked at her the way he used to look at me. The way a man looks at someone he wants. And she smiled back. Something cold spread through me, starting at my chest, freezing my lungs. My fingers trembled around my wine glass. They didn't see me. They walked to the table across the room and sat close, too close. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. That small, intimate gesture, the one he used to do for me, was enough to confirm everything. My heart didn't just break that night. It shattered. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking over. But suddenly, I was there, standing at their table, looking down at the two people who had destroyed my world. David's face drained of color. Claire froze mid-laugh, her fork halfway to her mouth. For a long moment, no one said a word. The room seemed to go silent, though I could feel eyes turning toward us. Finally, I spoke, my voice shaking but steady enough to cut through the air. "So this is what true love looks like." Claire's lips parted, her voice barely a whisper. "Sam, this isn't." "Don't," I said sharply, holding up a hand. "Don't insult me with lies." David stood, trying to take my arm. "Sam, please, you're making a scene." I laughed bitterly. "I'm making a scene? You're here with my best friend on our anniversary, and I'm the problem." People were staring now. A couple at a nearby table whispered something. I didn't care. Let them see. Let them watch the perfect couple fall apart. David's jaw tightened. "We can talk about this at home." "Home?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "You mean the place where you tell me you love me while sneaking around behind my back, with her?" Claire looked down, her face pale. I wanted her to look at me, to see what she'd done, but she couldn't. She just sat there, quiet, ashamed. I leaned closer, my voice low. "You were supposed to be my friend." Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall in front of them. I straightened up, threw my napkin on the table, and turned away before they could say another word. The room seemed to tilt as I walked out. My heels clicked on the marble floor, echoing in my ears. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely breathe. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air. And then, finally, the tears came. I don't remember how I got home that night. I don't remember taking off my dress or wiping off the makeup that had smeared across my cheeks. All I remember is sitting on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the wedding photo on the dresser. David's arm around me, Claire standing right beside me, her smile bright and genuine. That photo used to make me happy. Now it made me sick. I picked it up, stared at it one last time, and then threw it against the wall. The glass shattered, just like the illusion I'd been living in. The next morning, David came home. I'd barely slept. I was sitting on the couch when he walked in, looking tired, his tie loosened. He didn't look guilty, just inconvenienced. "Sam," he started, running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't have." I cut him off. "Don't, just don't." He sighed. "It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Please, don't insult me with cliches." He sat across from me, his face hard. "We were going to tell you, it just happened." "It just happened," I repeated. "You cheated on me with my best friend, David. That does just happen. You made choices." He looked away, his silence telling me everything I needed to know. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I didn't mean to hurt you." Something in me snapped. I stood up, glaring down at him. "But you did. You destroyed me. You destroyed us." For the first time, his composure cracked. "You think I'm happy? You think this was easy for me?" I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. "You don't get to play the victim, not this time." The following weeks were a blur of pain and paperwork. Lawyers, tears, sleepless nights. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city, far from everything familiar. The first night alone, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, realizing how quiet the world could be when the person you love is gone. But the silence was better than lies. Better than betrayal. I cried until I couldn't anymore. And then, something inside me went still. Not numb, just done. I was done being the woman who waited for someone else to save her. Done being the wife who smiled while her heart was breaking. Done being the friend who trusted too easily. It was time to start over, even if I didn't know how. A week later, I checked my mailbox for the first time since moving in. Bills, junk mail, and one thick, cream-colored envelope. No return address. I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check. The letter was from my late aunt, Grace. She had passed away 2 years ago, and I hadn't even known she left something for me. Her handwriting was elegant, familiar. "My dearest Sam, if you're reading this, I'm gone. You were always so full of heart, so full of dreams, but I saw the fear behind your smile. I know life hasn't been kind lately, so I'm giving you this, a gift of $70,000, not to survive, but to begin again. Use it to build something that makes you proud. Use it to find yourself again. With loves, Aunt Grace." My hands trembled as I stared at the check. $70,000. I could barely breathe. In that moment, something shifted inside me. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. Maybe this was my sign. Maybe this was my second chance. I looked around my empty apartment, at the boxes stacked against the walls, and whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." That night, as I lay in bed with the letter clutched in my hand, I made a promise. I would rebuild. Not for David, not to prove anything to Claire. But for me. They had taken my past. But my future. That was mine now. I didn't sleep much that night. The check lay on the nightstand beside me, the ink catching the faint glow of the streetlight through the blinds. $70,000. Every time I looked at it, I felt the same mix of disbelief and fear. That money felt like a door, one that led somewhere new, somewhere I had never dared to go. But I didn't know what was on the other side yet. And I was terrified to open it. For the next few days, I carried Aunt Grace's letter in my bag everywhere I went. It felt like she was still with me, her words echoing in my mind every time I wanted to give up. Use it to build something that makes you proud. But build what? I didn't even know who I was anymore, let alone what I was supposed to do with a gift that big. Most mornings, I sat by the window of my small apartment, sipping cheap coffee, staring at the city below. People rushed by, purposeful, busy, alive. And there I was, stuck somewhere between heartbreak and hope. The truth was, I didn't know how to start over. I had spent years being David's wife. Years being the dependable friend, the helper, the listener. Now, all I had left was myself, and I wasn't sure that was enough. One morning, I decided to take a walk downtown. It was one of those chilly spring mornings when the world feels clean and raw. The wind tugged at my hair as I walked past shop windows, bakeries, boutiques, and cafes full of people living lives that looked perfect from the outside. I stopped in front of a small wellness store. Candles, essential oils, soft music, the scent of lavender in the air. I stepped inside without thinking. The place was calm, almost sacred. A young woman behind the counter smiled. "Can I help you find something?" "I'm not sure," I said honestly. She laughed softly. Sometimes that's the best way to start. I wandered through the aisles, picking up little jars and reading the labels. Peace, focus, healing, courage. Words that felt like promises. One shelf held a set of small amber bottles, handmade essential oils. I picked one up, solace, it said in tiny silver script. The word hit me hard. Comfort in sorrow. I bought it without thinking. That night, I sat in my kitchen, the bottle beside me. I opened it, inhaled deeply, and felt something inside me shift. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. That's when the idea began to form, small at first, just a whisper. But it grew louder every time I thought about it. What if I created something that gave people peace? Something that reminded them that they could heal even after everything. The thought terrified me. Me start a business? I had no experience, no background, no clue where to begin. But the idea refused to leave. The next morning, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at me like a challenge. I started researching how to start a small business, how to make natural oils, how to create a brand. I spent hours watching videos, reading blogs, scribbling ideas in a notebook. The words solace and healing through nature kept showing up on every page. It wasn't just about products, it was about meaning. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was what Aunt Grace meant. This was what I was supposed to do. Days turned into weeks, and my apartment slowly transformed into a mini laboratory. There were boxes of dried flowers, bottles of oils, labels, jars, and notebooks scattered everywhere. My hands smelled like lavender and citrus most of the time. I made mistake after mistake. Too much scent, not enough blend, leaky bottles, bad labels. But each failure taught me something new. And slowly, my first product was born. Solace Essential Oil Blend for calm and healing. I remember holding that little bottle in my hand, tears in my eyes. It wasn't just a product. It was a piece of me, of my story. I made a small batch and set up an online store. The first week, I sold 2 bottles. 2. Most people would have been disappointed, but those 2 orders meant everything. It meant someone out there believed in what I made. One of the buyers left a review. This scent helped me sleep for the first time in weeks. It feels like peace in a bottle. I reread that message at least a dozen times. I couldn't stop smiling. It was the smallest success, but it felt like the first breath after drowning. Of course, not everything was easy. There were nights I wanted to quit. Nights when I stared at the dwindling number in my bank account and wondered if I was making a huge mistake. One night, I sat on my floor surrounded by packaging supplies, crying into my hands. "What am I doing?" I whispered to the empty room. "Who am I kidding?" And then I saw Aunt Grace's letter on the wall, where I had taped it above my desk. Her words seemed to whisper back, "Don't let this world take your fire." I wiped my tears, stood up, and got back to work. 3 months later, Solace started to gain traction. A small wellness blogger mentioned my products on her page. Orders tripled overnight. I stayed up until 3 a.m. packing boxes, handwriting thank you notes for every order. By the 4th month, I had customers across the country. And for the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was building. One evening, I got an email from an event organizer. She wanted me to set up a solace booth at a local wellness fair. It was my first real opportunity to showcase my products in person. I said yes immediately. When the day came, I stood behind my little booth, nerves buzzing in my stomach. I had spent the night before perfecting every label, every sample bottle, every detail. People stopped by, smelled the oils, smiled. Some bought, some just talked, but everyone left with something, even if it was just a kind word. A woman in her 40s stopped by, holding one of the sample bottles. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "I lost my husband last year, but this scent, it makes me feel calm again, like I can breathe." Tears stung my eyes. "That's exactly why I made it," I whispered. She squeezed my hand before walking away. And in that moment, I knew this was my purpose. By the end of the fair, I had sold out of everything. All 50 bottles gone. I sat in my car afterward, staring at the empty boxes, laughing and crying at the same time. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself, not for surviving, but for becoming. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. An influencer with over 100,000 followers shared a photo of my products, calling Solace her new favorite brand. Overnight, my website crashed from the flood of orders. It was chaos, beautiful, exhausting chaos. I spent every waking hour filling orders, answering messages, restocking supplies. By the end of that month, I had made nearly $10,000 in sales. $10,000 from something I built with my own hands. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the screen, shaking my head in disbelief. Aunt Grace's gift wasn't just money anymore. It had become the seed that grew into a new life. Sometimes I still thought about David, about Claire. Not with anger anymore, but with clarity. They had broken me, yes, but their betrayal had forced me to rebuild from the ground up. And in rebuilding, I found someone I never knew existed, me. One evening, months later, I saw them again. I was at a cafe downtown, having coffee with one of my new business partners. The place was packed, full of laughter and clinking cups. And then I saw them, David and Claire, sitting near the window. They looked smaller somehow, like the brightness I once saw in them had faded. David noticed me first. His eyes widened slightly, and he gave a small nod, half guilt, half regret. Claire looked away. I smiled politely, nodded back, then turned to my business partner. "I'm sorry," I said lightly. "What were we saying about the expansion plan?" Because that was it. That was my closure. Not revenge, not anger. Just peace. That night, as I walked home, the city lights glittered above me like stars. I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. Heartbreak had been my ending, yes, but it had also been my beginning. And as I unlocked the door to my apartment, now filled with shelves of neatly packed Solace products, I whispered softly, "Thank you, Aunt Grace. You gave me more than money. You gave me back my life. They say success changes people. But I didn't know that success could test you the same way pain once did." When Solace started growing, I thought the hard part was over. I thought I'd already faced my storm, betrayal, heartbreak, starting over. But I was wrong. That wasn't the end of my struggle. That was just the beginning of a new kind of fight. Because success doesn't just bring light, it brings shadows too. It started slowly, with long nights, endless orders, and constant decisions. I was handling everything alone: product making, packaging, shipping, emails, social media. At first, I didn't mind. I was grateful, excited, alive. But as weeks turned into months, exhaustion crept in like a quiet thief. There were days I'd wake up to hundreds of emails, each one demanding something from me. My phone buzzed nonstop. Customers wanted updates. Suppliers had delays. And my body, my poor body, begged me to rest. But I couldn't. I was terrified that if I slowed down, it would all disappear. So I pushed through. One night, I was labeling bottles at 2 a.m. when my hands started trembling. I'd barely eaten all day. My back ached, and my eyes burned. I dropped a bottle, it shattered, spilling lavender oil across the table. The smell filled the room, sharp and overwhelming. That's when it hit me: I was burning out. I sank to the floor, tears mixing with the scent of lavender. My body shook as I whispered, "What if I can't do this? What if I fail again?" The fear felt familiar. It was the same fear I felt after David left, the fear of being alone, of not being enough. But then, through my tears, I saw Aunt Grace's letter still pinned on my wall. Her words seemed to whisper through the quiet room. "Don't let this world take your fire." I took a deep breath, then another. "No," I said softly, wiping my tears. "Not again. I won't let fear win this time." The next morning, I made a decision. I needed help. It wasn't easy to admit that. I had built solace with my own hands. Every bottle, every label, every late night, they were mine. Letting someone else in felt like giving away a piece of my soul. But if I wanted solace to grow, if I wanted me to survive, I had to learn to trust again. So I posted a job ad online for a part-time assistant. A week later, I met Maya. She was 24, full of energy, with bright brown eyes and a smile that reminded me of who I used to be before heartbreak hardened me. She just graduated in business management and wanted experience in startups. "I'll do anything," she said eagerly during our interview. "I just want to learn." Something about her sincerity made me say yes. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. With Maya's help, everything started to flow again. She was fast, creative, and full of ideas. She helped organize my chaotic system, redesign the website, and even started a social media campaign that tripled our followers in 2 months. One afternoon, she looked up from her laptop and said, "You know, Sam, Solace isn't just a brand anymore. It's a movement. People don't just buy your oils, they connect with your story." I blinked, surprised. "My story?" She smiled. "You turn pain into something beautiful. That's what they see. That's what they love." I sat back in my chair, thinking about her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe Solace was more than I realized. But not everyone was rooting for me. As Solace grew, competitors started to notice. Some copied my product names, others undercut my prices. One even spread rumors online that my oils weren't pure. The first time I saw a negative review, a fake one, my stomach twisted. It read, "Products arrived broken and smelled weird. Don't waste your money." The user's name was fake, but the damage was real. Orders dropped that week. I couldn't sleep. I sat up at night scrolling through comments, trying to figure out who was behind it. I wanted to scream, to fight back. But then I remembered something I'd learned from all my pain. Not every battle deserves your energy. So I focused on my real customers. I sent follow-up emails, shared behind-the-scenes videos, and offered discounts. And within days, loyal buyers flooded my page with positive reviews. "Always love Solace, the best brand out there. These oils helped me through tough times. Thank you, Samantha." Reading those comments made me cry, not from sadness, but from gratitude. People believed in me. And I wasn't going to let them down. By the end of that year, Solace had officially become profitable. I hired 2 more employees, packers this time, and rented a small studio space to move production out of my apartment. I remember walking into that empty white room for the first time, sunlight streaming through the windows, boxes stacked neatly against the wall. "This," I whispered, "is mine." I had built this not with luck, not with help from anyone else, but with my pain, my persistence, and Aunt Grace's faith in me. Still, success didn't erase the loneliness. Sometimes I came home after long days, dropped my keys on the counter, and stared at the empty couch. There were moments when I wanted to share it all, the small victories, the laughter, the chaos, with someone. But then I'd remind myself, I had already given my heart to the wrong people once. Now my heart belonged to me. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I received an email from a big wellness retailer. They wanted to feature Solace in their online marketplace, a platform that reached millions of customers worldwide. I read the email twice, my hands shaking. They wanted a meeting. I called Maya immediately. She screamed so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Sam, this is huge. Do you realize what this means? You're going global." I laughed, but tears filled my eyes. "I can't believe it," I said softly. "We did it, Maya." The meeting was scheduled 2 weeks later at a fancy corporate office downtown. That morning, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my blazer. For the first time in years, I saw someone new staring back, confident, poised, unstoppable. When I walked into the glass building, I was David's ex-wife. I was the woman who got betrayed. I was Samantha Hart, founder of Solace. The meeting went perfectly. They loved my products, my vision, and my story. By the end of the week, the contract was signed. Solace was officially going international. But with every success, there came a new challenge. Scaling up meant bigger orders, stricter deadlines, and more pressure. I had to find manufacturers, deal with legal paperwork, and negotiate shipping contracts, all things I had zero experience with. There were moments when I wanted to give up. Like the time a supplier failed to deliver materials for a huge order, leaving me scrambling at midnight. Or when a shipment got stuck at customs, delaying everything for weeks. Each time, I felt the familiar sting of panic. But each time, I reminded myself I had survived worse. A failed delivery wasn't going to break me. A customs delay wasn't betrayal. I had already faced the worst pain possible, losing trust, losing love, losing everything I knew. This was just another test. And I passed every single one. Months passed, sales grew. Solace was featured in a popular magazine under Women Entrepreneurs to Watch. My photo appeared beside that headline. I stared at it for a long time. The woman in the picture looked strong, elegant, unshaken. But I knew the truth behind her eyes. That strength was born from pain. And that pain had become her power. Then came the night that changed everything again. It was the company's first anniversary. Maya and I hosted a small celebration in the studio. Laughter filled the room, music playing softly in the background. I made a toast. To new beginnings, I said, holding up my glass, and to the women who rise even when they've been broken. Everyone clapped. It was a beautiful night until I saw a message pop up on my phone. From David. Subject, congratulations. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I hadn't heard from him in over a year. I opened the message. I saw the article, "You've done well, Sam. I'm happy for you. Maybe we could talk sometime." I stared at the screen, my emotions twisting into something complicated, a mix of sadness, anger, and pity. For a long time, I didn't reply. Then I typed a single sentence. "Thank you, but there's nothing left to talk about." I hit send, locked my phone, and walked back into the party. That moment, clicking send, felt like closing the last door to my past. I was free. That night, as I stood on the studio balcony, watching the city lights sparkle below, I felt peace. Real deep peace. The kind that comes not from avoiding storms, but from surviving them. I thought of Aunt Grace, of her letter, of the check that had changed my life. She had given me money, yes, but more than that, she had given me courage. And that courage had built an empire. Success is a strange thing. It fills the holes in your life, but it can never truly fill the ones in your heart. For months, Solace was thriving, sales were steady, our products were being sold internationally, and I was living a life that looked perfect from the outside. I had everything I once dreamed of. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the world slowed down and the noise faded, the silence would return. That same hollow feeling, the one that used to visit me right after David left, would come creeping back. It whispered questions I didn't want to answer. Why did you let them hurt you so much? Why do you still think about it? Why can't you let go completely? No matter how far I ran, my past always seemed to follow me, like a shadow waiting for the light to fade. One morning, I woke up before sunrise. The city was still asleep, the streets outside my apartment washed in a pale blue glow. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, staring at my reflection in the glass. For a long time, I didn't move, I just looked. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had discovered her husband's betrayal. Her hair was longer now, her eyes calmer. She looked stronger, but also tired. Not from work, from carrying years of pain she never really faced. That's when I realized something. I had built my success on top of my wounds. I had covered the scars with achievements, thinking that if I just kept moving, I wouldn't have to feel. But healing doesn't come from hiding. It comes from looking directly at the things that broke you. So that morning, I decided it was time to face my reflection, not the woman I'd become, but the woman I used to be. I started therapy the following week. It wasn't an easy decision. I'd always prided myself on being strong, independent, resilient. I thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle their pain. But the truth, I was tired of pretending I had handled mine. My therapist, Dr. Elaine, was calm and gentle, with kind eyes that seemed to see right through me. The first time I sat in her office, I felt exposed, like she could read every thought I'd tried so hard to bury. "So, Samantha," she began softly, "what brought you here today?" I hesitated, staring at my hands. "I don't know, I guess. I just feel like something's missing." "Even with your success?" I nodded, especially with my success. She smiled knowingly. "You've built something incredible. But sometimes, we build things to protect ourselves from what we haven't healed." Her words hit me like a wave. For a long time, I didn't answer. Then I whispered, "I thought if I could prove myself, if I could succeed, I'd stop feeling broken." She nodded slowly, "And have you?" I looked down, tears filling my eyes. "No, I haven't." That session broke something open inside me. Every week, I peeled back another layer of my past, the betrayal, the humiliation, the loneliness. I told her things I'd never said out loud. The moment I saw David and Claire together. The nights I cried on the bathroom floor. The mornings I woke up and pretended I was fine. Sometimes I'd leave her office feeling lighter. Other times, I'd go home and sob until I fell asleep. But little by little, the pain began to lose its power. It stopped defining me. One day, after a particularly emotional session, Dr. Elaine said, "You've forgiven yourself, Samantha, but you haven't forgiven them." My chest tightened. Forgive them after what they did. She leaned forward gently. "Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you. You can't carry anger forever. It becomes poison." I shook my head. "I don't think I can forgive them, not after everything." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe don't start with forgiveness. Start with understanding. Understand why it hurt so much, what it taught you, what you learned about yourself." That night, her words stayed with me. I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory I had of David and Claire. The laughter, the betrayal, the silence. And for the first time, I tried to look at it differently. Not as something that destroyed me, but as something that revealed me. If they hadn't betrayed me, I might still be living that same quiet, unfulfilled life, depending on someone else to define my worth. Their betrayal was the spark that forced me to find my strength. And in a strange, twisted way, I realized I was grateful for that. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference in the city. The organizer had seen an article about solace and wanted me to share my story, my journey from heartbreak to entrepreneurship. I hesitated at first. Talking about my pain in front of hundreds of strangers felt terrifying, but something in me said yes. Maybe this was my chance, not just to inspire others, but to finally free myself from the last piece of the past that still held me. The day of the conference arrived. I stood backstage, heart pounding, my hands clutching the microphone. I could hear the buzz of voices from the crowd, hundreds of women waiting to listen. When they called my name, I took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, almost blinding, but when I looked out at the sea of faces, I felt calm. I started speaking about the betrayal, the pain, the loss, and how I built solace from nothing. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them about the nights I cried, the fear of failure, the days when I wanted to give up. And then I told them about the letter, about Aunt Grace, about the $70,000 gift that became the foundation of my new life. As I spoke, I could see women in the audience nodding, some wiping tears from their eyes. When I finished, I said softly, "Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened. Because it breaks you open, and that's where the light gets in." The room erupted in applause. And for the first time, I felt free. After the conference, women came up to me, thanking me for sharing my story. One of them said, "You made me believe I can start again, too." That single sentence made every tear, every sleepless night, worth it. But the biggest surprise came a week later. I was in the studio when Maya walked in, holding an envelope. "This came for you," she said, handing it over. I opened it and froze. It was a handwritten note. From Claire. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Sam, I saw your speech online. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to say I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking back then. I hurt you in the worst way possible, and I've regretted it every day since. Seeing what you've built, I'm proud of you. You turned pain into power. I hope one day you find it in your heart to let go. Claire. I sat there for a long time, reading and rereading her words. The old me would have torn it up, thrown it away, but instead, I placed it gently in a drawer. Not as forgiveness, but as closure. Because for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. That night, I took a long walk by the lake near my apartment. The air was cool, the water glimmered under the moonlight. I stood at the edge, closed my eyes, and whispered, I forgive you. Not for them. For me. And in that moment, something inside me finally let go. The pain. The resentment. The fear. It all drifted away, carried off by the wind, leaving only calm in its place. From that day on, everything felt lighter. I started smiling more, laughing more, living more. My work became more creative, my relationships deeper. I even started mentoring other women who wanted to build their own businesses. Because I had learned something priceless, healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about becoming someone who can look back and say, that no longer controls me. Sometimes I still think about David and Claire, not with pain, but with a quiet sense of distance. They are part of my story, but not the defining chapter. The defining chapter is the one I'm writing now. The one where I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. The one where I finally look in the mirror and see a woman I'm proud of. That night, as I stood in front of the mirror again, the same one where I had once seen a tired, broken version of myself, I smiled. My reflection smiled back, strong and sure. And for the first time, I whispered the truth I had waited years to say. You made it, Sam. You're finally free. The morning after I forgave them, everything looked different. The sky was the same soft shade of blue, the city buzzed the same way it always did, but somehow, it all felt new. Lighter, brighter, free. For years, I had carried my pain like armor, thinking it protected me. But now that I had set it down, I realized it had only ever weighed me down. Letting go wasn't weakness. It was strength. And with that freedom came clarity, a sense of direction I hadn't felt in years. That week, I returned to work with renewed energy. The team noticed it immediately. Maya looked at me one morning, her brows raised. You're glowing, she said with a teasing smile. I laughed. Maybe I finally got a full night's sleep. But it wasn't sleep, it was peace. The kind that comes when you stop fighting your past and start embracing your future. Solace was thriving, but I didn't just want it to be a brand anymore. I wanted it to be a movement. I wanted to create something bigger than me. Something that would help women like me, women who had been broken, forgotten, betrayed, rebuild their lives with strength and dignity. So I called a meeting with the team. Maya and our new marketing manager, Jordan, sat across from me in the office conference room, surrounded by product samples and coffee cups. I stood up, excitement bubbling inside me. I have an idea, I said. I want Solace to launch something new, a foundation. Maya tilted her head. A foundation? Yes, I said, nodding. We've already helped people heal with our products. Now, I want to help them rebuild their futures too. A percentage of every sale will go into a fund that supports women starting over, whether that's leaving toxic relationships, starting businesses, or just finding their footing again. Jordan's eyes widened. That's powerful. I smiled. We'll call it the Solace Rise Fund. There was silence for a moment, then Maya grinned. I love it, let's do it. And just like that, a new chapter of Solace began. The next few months were a whirlwind. We hosted fundraisers, partnered with local shelters, and launched campaigns online. People responded in ways I never expected. Emails poured in from women around the world, sharing their stories, stories of loss, of survival, of strength. Your oils gave me the courage to start again after my divorce. Solace helped me find myself after years of feeling invisible. I want to thank you, Samantha. You reminded me that healing is possible. Every message made me cry. Every message reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. This wasn't just business anymore. It was purpose. But with growth came new challenges. The bigger Solace became, the more people wanted from me: investors, partnerships, collaborations. Everyone saw potential. Everyone had ideas. It was exciting and overwhelming. I started traveling constantly: New York, London, Dubai. I met with buyers, spoke at conferences, appeared in interviews. I smiled, I performed, I inspired. And yet, deep down, I sometimes wondered if I was losing touch with the very thing that made Solace special. One night, after returning from a trip, I walked into my apartment and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. It was past midnight, my suitcase was still by the door, my heels pinched, my makeup felt heavy. For the first time in months, I felt tired, not physically, but emotionally. Who am I doing this for? I whispered to myself. And then, quietly, the answer came. For every woman who thinks she can't. That reminder steadied me. It wasn't about fame or expansion. It was about connection, about giving others the same lifeline my aunt once gave me. 2 weeks later, I got an invitation to speak at a global entrepreneurship summit in Paris. It was the kind of event that could put Solace on the international map for good. I accepted. Paris was everything people said it would be: breathtaking, romantic, alive. But for me, it was also symbolic. It was the place where my life would take its next leap forward. I stood on the stage that day, looking out at thousands of faces. CEOs, investors, dreamers, builders, all waiting to hear my story. And as I began to speak, I felt that same calm I'd felt months ago when I first forgave my past. My name is Samantha Hart, I began. 5 years ago, I was a broken woman. My husband betrayed me. My best friend destroyed my trust. I lost everything I thought defined me. But life has a way of turning heartbreak into fuel if you let it. The room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I told them about Aunt Grace's letter, about the $70,000 gift that became the seed of Solace, about the nights I cried, the moments I almost quit, and the morning I finally found peace. Then I said something that came straight from my soul. Pain is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of your power. The audience rose in applause, cameras flashed, people cried. And I knew, in that moment, that Solace wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been broken and dared to rise again. After the speech, as I stepped off stage, a man approached me. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with kind eyes and a confident smile. That was incredible, he said, offering his hand. I'm Daniel, I work with the Global Wellness Initiative. I think what you're doing with Solace is extraordinary. Thank you, I said, shaking his hand. It means a lot. He smiled. We should talk. I think there's potential for collaboration, maybe something global. Normally, I would have handed the conversation to my team later, but something about his tone, calm, genuine, made me pause. So we talked for hours. About business, yes, but also about life, about second chances, about why helping others mattered more than money ever could. When I finally left that night, I realized something strange. I was smiling again, the real kind, the kind that came from connection. Daniel and I stayed in touch. At first, it was about work, potential partnerships, shared projects. But slowly, our emails turned into late-night calls, and our calls turned into long, warm conversations about everything and nothing. He never pushed, never rushed, he just listened. And for the first time since David, I felt safe letting someone in again. It scared me, that vulnerability. I'd built walls so high I thought no one could ever climb them. But Daniel didn't try to climb. He waited patiently until I opened the door myself. A few months later, he came to visit the Solace headquarters in New York. When he walked in, Maya nudged me and whispered, "That's him, isn't it?" I laughed. "What makes you say that?" She grinned, "Because you've been smiling like a teenager all week." Daniel and I spent the day finalizing a collaboration, a global wellness retreat sponsored by Solace. But even after the meeting ended, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. We went for a walk by the river that evening. The city lights shimmered on the water, and the air was soft and cool. At one point, he turned to me and said, You know, you talk about healing like it's a destination, but I think it's a journey and you're walking it beautifully. I looked at him surprised. You really think so? He smiled. I don't think so, I know so. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and looked out at the water. For once, I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking about pain or loss or betrayal. I was simply there, in the moment, with someone who saw me for who I had become, not who I used to be. And that was enough. As months passed, the partnership with Daniel's organization became one of Solace's most successful initiatives. The retreat we created, Solace Rising, brought together women from all over the world to heal, learn, and build new lives. The stories that came from it were powerful: women starting businesses, leaving toxic homes, finding confidence again. Every time I walked into one of those retreats, watching women smile and share and grow, I thought, this is what healing looks like. Not perfection, not forgetting, but becoming. One night, as I stood on the balcony of my home, the same city that had once witnessed my heartbreak, I thought about how far I'd come. From betrayal to business. From pain to purpose. From being broken to being whole. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Truly, fully living. I thought of Aunt Grace again, her letter, her gift, the faith she had in me before I ever had it in myself. And I whispered into the night, I did it, Aunt Grace, I really did. Now, when people ask about my success, I tell them this. It didn't start with money, it started with loss. It didn't grow from luck, it grew from resilience. And it didn't come from others believing in me. It came from me finally believing in myself. Because when you stop letting pain define you, when you use it instead to fuel your purpose, you don't just rebuild your life. You create something unstoppable. I used to think the worst pain in life came from betrayal. But that was before I learned what it feels like to lose something you built with your own hands. Pain from betrayal breaks your heart. But pain from loss tests your soul. And I was about to learn that the hard way. It started like any other morning. I was in my office, sipping coffee, the sunlight streaming across the white marble floor. The Solace team buzzed around me, laughter, chatter, the faint scent of lavender and rose drifting through the air. Everything felt peaceful. Safe. Then Maya burst into my office, her face pale. Sam, she said breathlessly, holding her phone out, you need to see this. I took her phone, frowning. On the screen was a video, flames roaring through what looked like a warehouse. Smoke, chaos, shouting. My heart dropped. The caption read, Breaking news. Massive fire at Midtown distribution facility, Solace Wellness among affected. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. No, I whispered, that can't be ours. But then, as the camera panned, I saw it, the faint glow of our Solace logo, blackened by smoke. It was ours. Our main warehouse. Our entire inventory. Gone. By the time we reached the site, the fire trucks were still there. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burned wood and melted plastic. I stood frozen, watching as firefighters doused the last flames. All around me, my employees huddled together, whispering in disbelief. Maya stood beside me, silent, tears running down her cheeks. It didn't feel real. Just days ago, we had been celebrating a record-breaking month. Now, all that remained of our hard work was ash and ruin. I took a few steps forward, my heels crunching on charred debris. Where there had once been shelves of products, packaging, and dreams, there was now nothing but blackened walls. The heat had destroyed everything: months of production, inventory, shipping equipment, even our upcoming product line. I felt like the world was spinning. A firefighter approached, pulling off his helmet. "Ma'am," he said gently, "we did everything we could. We believe it started from a faulty electrical system. I'm sorry." I nodded numbly. Was anyone hurt? Thankfully, no. The night crew had just clocked out before it started. I exhaled in relief, my body shaking. At least no one was hurt. That was all that mattered. Still, as I looked around, the weight of it hit me like a wave. Everything I had built, gone. The next few days were a blur. Meetings with insurance agents, calls with investors, endless questions, forms, and reports. Everyone wanted answers, but I didn't have any. I barely slept. I barely ate. My mind kept replaying the fire, the way the flames had swallowed everything I worked for. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw smoke. At one point, I sat on my office floor, surrounded by paperwork, my head in my hands. How am I supposed to rebuild all of this? I whispered to no one. For the first time in years, doubt crept back in, the same kind that once haunted me after David's betrayal. Maybe this is it, Sam. Maybe this is where it all ends. But then, through the haze of exhaustion, I heard Aunt Grace's voice in my memory. When life takes everything from you, build again, and this time build stronger. I wiped my tears. No, I said softly to myself, not again, I won't fall apart this time. The following morning, I gathered my team. They looked at me with a mix of sadness and fear. Some of them were new, they hadn't seen me fight through the darkness before. They didn't know that I'd already survived worse. I stood in front of them, my voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. I know you're scared, I said. I know it looks bad, but Solace was never just a building. It was never just a warehouse or a logo. Solace is us, it's our story. It's every woman we've helped, every life we've touched. The fire may have taken our products, but it hasn't taken our purpose. Maya's eyes shone with tears. And then, one by one, the team nodded. We weren't done yet. Over the next few weeks, we worked like never before. We moved operations into a temporary space. Suppliers reached out, offering to help. Customers sent messages of support. We're with you, Solace. Please rebuild, we'll wait. You've helped so many of us heal, now it's our turn to help you. I cried reading those messages. For so long, I thought Solace was about me, about my healing, my story. But now I realized it belonged to everyone who believed in it. Then, one afternoon, Daniel called. I just heard about the fire, he said, his voice full of concern. Are you okay? I smiled weakly, even though he couldn't see it. We're managing. It's hard, but we'll rebuild. I know you will, he said softly. That's who you are, the woman who turns ashes into gold. His words made my throat tighten. He paused. What do you need? I hesitated. Honestly, I don't even know yet. Then let me help you figure it out, he said simply. And he did. Over the next month, Daniel became my anchor. He connected me with people in his network, investors, suppliers, logistics experts. He helped me negotiate fair deals and rebuild faster than I thought possible. And through it all, he never once made me feel weak for needing help. He always reminded me, even strong women need shoulders sometimes. Within 3 months, the new Solace facility was up and running. It wasn't as big as the old one, but it was ours, rebuilt with care, passion, and resilience. When we opened the doors for the first time, my team and I stood in a circle, holding hands. This is more than a comeback, I said. This is proof that nothing can burn down what's built from purpose. We released a new campaign that week, From Ashes We Rise. It went viral. People shared our story everywhere. The woman who lost everything twice but refused to give up. Orders poured in. Within weeks, we surpassed our previous sales record. But this time, it wasn't about numbers. It was about rebirth. A few months later, I stood on the balcony of the new Solace headquarters, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Daniel joined me, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. He handed me one and smiled. You did it again, Sam. I laughed softly. We did it. He leaned against the railing beside me. You know, I've seen a lot of people crumble when life hits them hard. But you don't just rise, you rise higher. I looked at him, feeling warmth spread through my chest. Maybe because I've learned that falling doesn't mean failure, I said quietly. It just means it's time to build differently. He nodded, and stronger. Always stronger. We stood in silence for a while, sipping our coffee, the city lights flickering below us. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally understood that it didn't need to be. That night, I went home and opened Aunt Grace's letter again, the one that started it all. The paper was worn now, the edges slightly frayed, but her words still felt alive. Use it to build something that makes you proud. Use it to find yourself again. I traced the words with my fingers and smiled. I found her, Aunt Grace, I whispered. and she's stronger than I ever imagined. Life has a way of circling back, testing you just when you think you're safe. But I've learned that every test is a chance to prove your strength. The fire destroyed my warehouse, but it didn't destroy my will. Just like betrayal once shattered my heart, but it didn't destroy my spirit. Every loss, every failure, every scar, they all became part of my foundation. And that's the thing about starting over. You don't rebuild what was. You build what's better. As I lay in bed that night, the city lights glowing through my window, I thought about my journey from heartbreak to healing, from ashes to empire. And I realized something powerful. I wasn't afraid of losing anymore. Because I had already learned how to rise. And that, I thought with a smile, was the greatest fortune I could ever have. There are moments in life when you stop and realize you've become the person you once needed. That's what hit me the morning I stood on the stage at the Solace Global Summit. Thousands of women filled the hall, entrepreneurs, leaders, dreamers, survivors. The air buzzed with hope. Banners hung from the ceiling, each one carrying the same message. From pain to power, the Solace movement. As I looked around, my heart swelled. We had done it. What started as a small business born from heartbreak had become something so much bigger. A global movement for healing and empowerment. But standing there, microphone in hand, all I could think was how it all began with one broken woman, one letter, and a check for $70,000. The lights dimmed, and the host introduced me. Please welcome the founder and heart behind Solace, Samantha Hart. Applause filled the room. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. For a moment, I just stood there, looking out at the sea of faces. Some smiling, some teary-eyed, some just waiting for words that might remind them they could rise too. Then I began. 5 years ago, I said softly, I thought my life was over. My husband had betrayed me with my best friend, and I was left with nothing but shattered trust and an empty home. I thought pain had ruined me, but I was wrong. Pain didn't ruin me, it rebuilt me. The audience went still. You could feel the air shift. I received a letter and a gift from my aunt, I continued. She believed in me before I believed in myself. With that gift, I built something, not just a company, but a new version of me. I paused, smiling gently. And that's the truth about healing. It doesn't erase the pain. It transforms it. Every scar can become strength if you let it. As I spoke, faces lit up. Some nodded. Some cried. Some simply closed their eyes, listening as if my words were touching old wounds they hadn't dared to face. When I finished, I said the words that had guided me for years. Your pain is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your power. The room erupted in applause. After the event, women lined up to speak with me. One young woman, no older than 25, grabbed my hand with tears in her eyes. You don't know what your story means to me, she said. I left an abusive marriage last year. I thought I'd never recover. But because of Solace, I started my own business. You saved me. I squeezed her hand. No, sweetheart, I said softly. You saved yourself. We just reminded you that you could. She smiled through her tears. That moment, that connection, reminded me exactly why I'd fought so hard to build all this. This wasn't just about oils or branding anymore. It was about becoming. Over the next year, the Solace Foundation grew faster than I could have imagined. We funded hundreds of women-owned startups. We opened healing centers in 3 countries. We hosted retreats where women could rediscover their strength. Everywhere I looked, I saw stories like mine, women who had been betrayed, abandoned, overlooked, turning their pain into something beautiful. And each time, I thought of Aunt Grace. Her gift hadn't just changed my life, it had changed thousands. It was like she had planted a single seed in me, and now, a forest of strong women was growing from it. One afternoon, I received a call from Daniel. You're not going to believe this, he said, his voice brimming with excitement. You've been nominated for the Global Woman of Impact Award. I blinked, stunned. What? He laughed. You heard me. They're recognizing you for Solace's work and everything you've done for women around the world. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared out my office window, watching the city glimmer in the afternoon light. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who cried on her bathroom floor, who doubted she'd ever be enough, who thought her story had ended when her marriage did. Now she was here. Not just surviving, but leading. The award ceremony took place in London that December. As I stood backstage, dressed in a sleek black gown, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. This wasn't just about recognition. It was about proof that the worst moments of your life can become the foundation for your greatest victories. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. The host handed me the award, a crystal figure shaped like a rising phoenix. I smiled through tears as I spoke. "I once thought my life ended with betrayal," I said, "but now I understand it only began there. Because sometimes you have to be broken open for your light to shine through." Applause thundered again, and for a second I swear I felt Aunt Grace beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "See," her voice seemed to whisper, "I knew you'd find your wings." After the ceremony, I returned to New York and sat in my office long after everyone had gone home. The award sat on my desk, sparkling under the soft light. Maya had left a note beside it. "To the woman who taught us all to rise." I smiled. Then I looked around at the walls covered in photos. Pictures from retreats, product launches, women holding signs that said "I survived" or "I solaced myself." Each face told a story. And that's when I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who had ever been told she couldn't. That spring, I decided to do something I'd dreamed about for years. I created a scholarship program under the Solace Foundation, the Grace Hart Fellowship, named after my aunt. It would fund women who wanted to rebuild their lives through education or entrepreneurship. At the launch event, I stood before a crowd of young women and said, "This is for the ones who were told they'd never make it. This is for the ones who started over when they had nothing left. This is for the women who rise again and again, no matter how many times life tries to break them." When the first group of fellows walked onto the stage, I couldn't hold back my tears. They were smiling, confident, fearless, everything I had once prayed to be. In that moment, I realized I had built more than a business. I had built a legacy. Life felt full and beautiful. But in the quiet moments, I still thought about the past. Not with pain, but with gratitude. Because without it, I wouldn't have become this woman. One evening, I found myself standing on the same lake path I used to walk during my hardest days. The air was cool, the sky a deep gold as the sun set. I remembered the girl who used to stand there crying, asking the universe why. Now I smiled at the memory. Because I finally knew the answer. Every heartbreak, every loss, every challenge, it wasn't meant to destroy me. It was meant to shape me. To turn me into someone strong enough to help others heal. Daniel joined me later that evening. He wrapped his arm around me and said, "You've changed so many lives, Sam. Do you ever stop to realize that?" I smiled softly. Sometimes, but mostly I just feel lucky that I got the chance. He kissed my forehead. "You didn't get lucky, you got brave." I leaned against him, watching the water shimmer under the fatting light. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. Not because someone completed me, but because I had completed myself. Now, every time I tell my story, I tell it with pride. Not as a tale of betrayal, but as a story of rebirth. Not about what I lost, but what I found. I found strength in pain, purpose in failure, and power in forgiveness. That's the real fortune Aunt Grace gave me, not money, but belief. Belief that no matter how broken I became, I could always rise again. As I write this now, the sun is rising outside my window. The city is waking up, and somewhere out there, another woman is about to face her own heartbreak. She doesn't know it yet, but this pain will not destroy her. It will shape her. It will lead her to a new version of herself, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. And maybe, one day, she'll stand where I am now, telling her own story, lighting the way for others. Because that's what strength truly is. It's not about never falling. It's about standing up again and again and saying, "This is not the end of me. This is just where I rise."